friends, we're getting near the end of our story of the Exodus, of how God brought his people out of slavery into Egypt and brought them back to the promised land that he had given them to live in. So let's review. Moses was born in Egypt, ran away, came back, God sent the plagues, they finally got out of Egypt, they went to the desert, to Mount Sinai, and they made a big mistake by making a calf, a golden calf, and they worshipped it, and God said, I'm going to wipe you all out, and Moses said, no, please don't, and so he didn't. And along the way, God provided food and water, and so we see in this story how God rescued them, provided for them, and protected them. And now they're finally going to get to the promised land. Finally, it's been a while. It takes a long while to get there, and they stop and they build the tabernacle along the way, and they finally get there. And in the 400 years since they left the promised land, other people have moved in. But this is God's plan. This is God's plan. This is part of God's rescue plan to save the whole world. And the place that it happened was very important for a couple reasons, and we've talked about that before. And if you're wondering about that, email me and I'll send you an email or give you a call, and we can talk about why it was important that they have this land, the promised land. But it was part of God's plan. It was important, and he had given it to them, and some other people had moved in. So they're camping outside the promised land, and they're looking in, and so Moses is like, okay, we're going to send some spies in, and they're going to go into the promised land and check it out and see what it's like, and they're going to report back to us. So they choose 12 spies, one from each tribe, because there's 12 tribes. And so they get the 12 spies, and they give them directions, and they send them into the promised land. And they were there for 40 days. And that 40, again, is kind of an important number. We hear that number often in the Bible. It rained and poured during the flood for 40 days. And Moses was a prince in Egypt for 40 years, and then he was in the wilderness for 40 years before coming back to rescue his people. And there's other times in the Bible that 40 is kind of that magic number. So they're there for 40 days, and they realize, wow, this place is wonderful. They describe it as a land flowing with milk and honey, which doesn't mean there's rivers of milk and rivers of honey. It means it's a very rich, bountiful land. The crops are good. The animals that are raised there are really tasty to eat and all that. So they come back, and they even come back and they bring some fruit from there. And it says that they grabbed one bunch of grapes. Now here we grab a bunch of grapes, and it's, like this bag, like big like the bag you get in the grocery store. Well, it said they had to carry a bunch of grapes on a pole with 2 people. It was so big. And so they come back with fruits that they're bringing, and they're telling the people, like, this is a great land. It's a land flowing with milk and honey, and the crops are great. It's wonderful. And then they kind of get a divided opinion. And 10 of them say, but the people living there are huge, and they're big, and they're strong, and they're scary, and they'll take us over, and they'll defeat us, and they'll enslave our children, and this is just terrible. We shouldn't go take over. It's better if we had died in Egypt. Let's just go back to Egypt. Again, with the going back to Egypt. But the 2, whose names were Joshua and Caleb, said, no, yes, the people are big and strong, but God gave us this land, and God is with us, and it is our promised land, and it's part of his rescue plan, and we've got to go take it. We can do it. Remember how God took care of us and protected us. We can do this. And so who did the people choose to listen to? Did they choose to listen to the 10 who were afraid and not trusting God? Or did they choose to listen to the 2 who wanted to trust God and go take their promised land? Well, they decided to listen to the 10. And they said, it's terrible, we can't do it. And how do you think God reacted to that? He was angry. Here, they had just seen his miracles. They had just seen the plagues and how he protected them at the Red Sea. They'd been provided for and fed in the desert, and they weren't going to trust him. And he said, that's it. I'm going to wipe him out again. I'm going to wipe him out. I am so tired of this. I am tired of them doubting me. I'm done. I'm going to wipe him out. Moses, I'm going to restart with you. And Moses again goes to God and says, please, 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 they're a foolish people who are doubting you, but you are a God of mercy, and you're a God of grace, and you're a God of forgiveness, and you're a God of patience. So please, 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 please don't wipe them out. Please give them another chance. So God says, okay, but I really am done. And so God said, I'll give them sort of another chance. And he says, I won't wipe them out yet. But I won't let them go to the promised land. He said, any adult over the age of 20, over 20 years of age, because they were the ones who voted to not go to the promised land and listened to the 10 spies who were scared, they don't get to go. Israel, the nation, the people, had to spend 40 years. He told them, he said, the spies spent 40 days there, so the people get to spend 40 years in the wilderness. They get to spend 40 years there until everybody over the age of 20 has died. And then I'll let their children go in. Because they were afraid that their children would be enslaved, and instead I'm going to take their children in and give them their reward. Except for those 2 spies who trusted him, for Joshua and Caleb. All the rest of them over the age of 20, all of the adults who chose not to trust God, had to go wander the rest of their lives in the wilderness until they died for 40 years. And the kids got to go in, except for Joshua and Caleb, because they chose to trust God. And we're like that sometimes. We see God provide, and we see him protect us, and we see him and all his blessings and how good he is, and we sometimes forget, and we doubt God. But God is patient, and God is loving, and he gives us chance after chance after chance. And he is a wonderful and kind God. But sometimes we push him too far. And they pushed him too far, and they got a consequence. And so they pretty much got a 40-year timeout. And I sometimes wonder, what was it like for their kids growing up knowing that once they got old enough and the time had passed, the 40 years had passed, they would get to go to the promised land. And I wonder if that was a lesson for them, that they were choosing to trust God more. I don't know. I wasn't there. I didn't get to talk with them and find out what they would have thought. But that would be interesting to find out. So anyways, that's our story. We've got a couple more stories. I'm going to tell you just a couple more things that happened while they're in the wilderness. And then we'll be done with our unit about the Exodus. Okay, take care. I miss you guys. Bye.